Welcome to Aunty K's, your favorite radical queer indigenous auntie, bringing you tarot every day. Hello everyone, welcome to Aunty K's Tarot. I'm here today to join the tag Tarot to the Extremes or Tarot Extremes by Marlena Teresa, which I have put the link to in the description box so you can see the original video. The description box also has the list of questions for the VR, so you can follow along and do your own also. All right, so the first one is Minimalist versus Maximalist deck. And I actually really like minimalist art, but I have a serious lack of minimalist decks because I'm sort of a fan of rainbow puke. And so here we go. So my minimalist deck is the Tarot of Life. And it has really clean, clear images, a lot of white background. And so I feel this is probably the most minimalist deck that I have and have kept in my collection. I really enjoy this. I think the colors really pop out on this deck and that really works for me. But this is the most minimalist deck I have, which I realize is possibly not all that minimalist compared to some of your collections. But for me, this is my most minimalist deck. And whoops, I really, really like this deck. And I was really happy to obtain it and have it come into my collection. So my Maximalist deck, I ended up choosing the Next World Tarot. And that's because there's just so much in the images. They're so full. There's so much to look at. Originally, I had the pocket version of this deck, and my eyesight didn't do really well with that. So I got the full-size version, and there's just so much going on. There's times where I feel like I can pull one card with this deck and just keep looking and looking and looking at the image and diving deeper into the images. So I'm going to call this my Maximalist deck for the purpose of this. And there is really two contenders, but one is going to come up in one of the other categories. All right, so the next one is daytime versus nighttime. And for my daytime deck, I chose Desert Illuminations. It's based in New Mexico. It's bright, it's colorful, it looks like the heat of summer at midday. And I really enjoy it. And this is definitely one of my favorite decks. And it is definitely very daytime like to me. Okay, I want to say something about Desert Illuminations. It is one of my favorite decks, and I'm also struggling with it right now. So it's been sitting on a shelf. I discovered that the author's maiden name is the same as one of my birth names, Demore and Flute. Demore being my birth father and Flute being my birth mother. And I tried reaching out to the artist because I was like, oh my God, I've studied like the surname enough, everything I could find genealogy wise, trying to track down family members, nobody wanting to answer me. you are also part of this family line, and I've already discovered there's only like one line of Demores in the US. Like they're all related and descended from the same folks. And didn't answer. And so it's one of my favorite decks, and yet emotionally it's sort of sitting in a semi-purgatory where I take it out and then I put it back. And then on the opposite end of that is, for my nighttime deck, is the Trionfi Della Paradoxical Purple. It looks like nighttime throughout the entire deck. Yeah, it just looks like nighttime throughout the entire deck. One thing I really appreciate for a deck that's so dark is that the colors on it really do pop out, and it makes it easy to read even if I am reading it at night. And I do read it at night sometimes because it is currently in my work stack. All right. Okay, so best shuffle versus worst shuffle. I chose the Landback Tarot, which is my own deck. And it's a linen cardstock, and for me, linen cardstock is the best shuffle. And even though this is Oracle deck sized, and my hands are small because I wear a children's 4.5 to size 5 shoe, like all linen decks, it just shuffles really, really easily. And spreads like an absolute dream. And so that's why I chose my own deck for this. And like, this is a linen 310 cardstock, and it's got 101 cards in the deck because it's a full 78 cards plus a shadow arcana called the Oracles of Colonization. So like I can still shuffle it, and I don't think I could shuffle any other deck of this size. I have Oracle decks that are 101 cards, and I can't shuffle them, and so this hands down got that. So on the opposite end of that is Mystic Medleys, which is a 350 GSM cardstock deck. And I find this deck a lot of fun. And I do find it really fun. And I find it a pretty easy read. But it's really hard to use for work, where I have to, working on the hotlines, pick up a deck, shuffle it really quickly. And I can't. When I shuffle this deck, I tend to break it in half to shuffle and do this. And that's just a pain in the butt to do on the hotlines. And I rarely have thick decks on my table for work because of that. Every now and then I throw one in as an exception, which I have currently gone and done now. But that deck is going to be discussed also. So that for me is my best and my worst shuffle. I'm at this point unlikely to buy a 350 GSM cardstock deck, especially one that is matte or a rose petal finish, because it's so hard for me to shuffle. All right, so our next choices are Confronting versus Comforting. And so for Confronting, I have Tarot Neocolonial Della Americas. And I think that this deck is absolutely brilliant, or box is this, in case you haven't seen this deck before, which could also put it into another category, but I'm trying to use one deck per category. This deck is Confronting. It has an excellent guidebook, and its name should tell you this deck isn't going to give you a decolonial dream. It's giving you the harsh reality of neocolonialism, which is necessary to the reading of the lives of the majority of people on this planet who are living under colonialism or neocolonialism. And this deck, like Next World, has so much going on in the images, and they get right into it and ask really, really hard questions. It presents historical figures in really difficult places, and it talks about it. Like, we want to talk about neocolonialism, confronting, all that stuff in there. This deck is just migrant carrying a white baby Jesus-like figure. It's really confronting. It really, you see the white lady clothed, and then the brown and black woman unclothed. Like, this deck is going to confront every aspect of your life, and it's going to call out the truths that you didn't want to see in life, in relationships. And I think it is absolutely one of the most brilliant decks I own. And the guidebook is one I've been reading and studying. It's so worth it. A migrant crosses a river while carrying a walking staff and child on his back. The two other staffs behind them are plant stalks growing in the water. The main figures are inspired by the image of St. Christopher and baby Jesus. According to the legend, the saint had dedicated his life to carrying people across a river. One night when he carried a child, he felt a heavy burden grow even heavier with each step he took. When he asked about this, the child declared he was Christ. Thus, St. Christopher had been bearing the weight of the world. In this card, we also see a border wall with a watchtower in the background, a helicopter in the sky above it, a UFO hovering below. In the water, an alien crosses the river. The labeling of migrants as aliens is a political ploy that often dehumanizes people in order to justify the severity of border laws. To the far right, a sea goat, the sign of Capricorn, is half in water, half on shore. This combines the persistent nature of water with the grounded nature of earth. A pickup truck with migrants arrives at the border wall. The card represents initiative, trade, effort, and enterprise. It also implies cooperation, shared struggles, and found strength. Collaboration is needed in order to move ahead and complete the task in question. Odds may seem to be against us, but the end of adversity might be right around the corner. So if you want a deck that's going to confront you, that is going to call out whiteness in this world, this deck is hands down going to provide you with that. All right. For my comforting deck, I chose the Gentle Tarot. It's a Gentle Tarot. It's right there in the name. That doesn't mean it doesn't, confront things and that it's all light and fluff. This is the Devil card, and you're carrying a chain, and but it is also a very comforting deck as well. I find the guidebook also really comforting as an Indigenous person reading a deck that's from an Indigenous viewpoint. Even if it's not blatant, it's there. It culturally makes sense to me. on levels that a lot of guidebooks don't make sense to me in the same way. And so the Gentle Tarot is the deck that I choose for a comforting deck. So the next one is every day versus every so often. Okay, I really wanted to stick to tarot decks, but Demor's Fortunes is my everyday deck. Like, I got this deck, I made this deck this year, and it's super worn already because I use this on almost every reading I do on the hotlines. I use it every day. Another deck that I use almost daily on the hotlines, since I wanted to do my best to stick to tarot, is the Fortune Queen's Tarot. And this one that I have is volume 1. It's pretty RWS, which makes it a straightforward and practical read. It has all the people are drag queens. And this just provides me my own personal enjoyment and amusement when I'm reading for other folks who, for the most part, are not calling in via video, so they can't see the cards I'm using. And I find this when some guy is calling in and asking some question about a partner that just seems obnoxious and really like filled with toxic masculinity, I'm going to pull this deck out and read him in this deck of drag queens, because it just makes me feel better about my life and the job I'm doing in the moment. So that is my everyday decks. And I'm just placing them back in my workstation. Okay, so a deck that is every so often is Le Tarot Archtypal. I find this deck fascinating. The guidebook is in French. It's a Marseille deck. It's very atypical. It's also minimalist. And I don't use it all the time, but I do pull it out for some readings, usually a reading with less cards, like a 3-card pull, and I sit and I go into these abstract images. I find the abstract images do take a little bit more work from me, and so usually when I'm pulling it out, it's for that reason, to enjoy that, to enjoy the work. And I like that about it. And I find the images, like I said, striking and really fascinating. So while it's not an everyday deck, because it isn't the easiest to read with for me, it is a deck I pull out every so often, sort of like a special occasion for me, if that makes sense. All right, overrated versus underrated. I struggled with this because I really wasn't sure how other people are rating decks enough to know what was over and underrated. So I decided on this. I decided Divine Diversity is, I'm going to call it overrated, because this deck calls itself diverse. Unless you consider diversity to be made up almost exclusively of 2S LGBTQTIA folks, it's not all that diverse. Like, the majority of this deck is overwhelmingly white folks. And I did count it up at one point. It's around 20-25% BIPOC folks, or Black, Brown, Indigenous people of color. And that's not diverse. That's not diverse enough to call yourself diversity. So I'm counting this as overrated because I think the creator overrated their own deck and goals severely. Like, really? Not at all diverse. So an underrated deck is a deck I know I haven't seen on folks' channels, and so it definitely counted as underrated, and it's the Self-Love Tarot. It is a pips with feeling kind of deck. It's got this goldness, and like the feelings in it is strong. It's a fascinating deck. I love the bodies on this deck. They are real everyday folks, other than the fact that several of them have animal heads. It's not diverse. It is an all-white deck, and it's the only all-white deck that's ever stayed in my collection. And this is because I know this artist has grown past making an all-white deck, because the next project I saw on their website was a very diverse piece of work, and it was a matching memory game type of thing, but they were all different types of boobs and different shapes, and in many different skin tone shades, not just peach. And so growth is such, I think growth means more than almost anything. It means more than an apology. It means more than empty words. And so because of that, I still love this deck, and I don't use it every day, but I do quite like it. And I pull it out when I feel a client really needs it. It's good at that whole self-love deal. So that is my overrated versus underrated decks. And then the last one is light work versus shadow work. And I do not consider myself a light worker at all. And so I struggled with this, but Marlena's description of conscious versus subconscious made that work out. So for my light work deck, which was less based on that description and more based on, you know, the way the deck looks, is the Little Buddha Tarot. It is light and childish, which I think would be useful for light work. And it's a very straightforward read. Like, it's very RWS. And so I feel it's really like that conscious type of situation that Marlena was talking about and describing. And everything's like really laid out, you know. There's symbolism in here that is related to Buddhism, and it's included in the guidebook so that you know. And that matches with the creator, who's a Black woman married to a Buddhist person. And so it's also appropriate versus inappropriate or appropriated. Okay, so the shadow work deck, the one that really goes into subconscious, I decided is the Dream Vision Tarot. And the images just look like they exist in the dream world. And it's fascinating. And there's images in the background of cards and in the shadows of cards. And so I feel that fits this description really, really well. Like, a good example is this card here. So we have the person with 6 coins, 3 in each hand, not like even, showing you an imbalance. But the real imbalance is underneath here in these like shadowy hand figures that are empty and waiting. So this is what I decided is my shadow work deck. And yeah, this was fun. It was enjoyable. Everyone gets to see everyone's different decks doing the tag. So if you feel called to do the tag, go ahead and do it. And I will look forward to seeing your video also. See you all later, folks.